Hi everyone, it's Fiona here from fionamarks.com, and I'm back with a video about Prince Harry's chart. This is a series that we're doing examining each house in the chart as a way of demonstrating this systematic approach to understanding what's going on in someone's chart and building up a picture of their life experience, the karma that they're experiencing, based on all the factors that are coming in from the sign, the house itself, from the ruler of that house, and from any planets in the house. So let's get started. I want to share my screen with you. Okay, and you can see that on the left we have Prince Harry's chart, which we already went through in the introductory video. So if you want to familiarize yourself with the factors that are there in the chart, go back and have a look at that video. And then here on the right side of the screen, we have the blog post about Harry's second house. So when we zoom out, we might want to think before we think about Harry particularly, we want to think about the second house of anybody's chart. What sort of things are you looking for when you're researching someone's second house? And you might think about your own second house as well. So factors that we can think about are the person's responsibilities and their resources. So if we think of it from that hero journey perspective, the second house is when we've begun the life path on the first house, and the second house is when we go out and begin to gather the resources that we're going to need for this hero's journey. So it's those resources that we find for ourselves that we're responsible for, and how we meet our responsibilities and meet responsibilities to others. It's also all to do with the face and the skull and the head. So it can be about the voice, the throat, and also the mouth and the teeth, and the way that we speak, the words that we choose, or how those words come out of our mouth. And it's also about what we put into our mouth. So there can be things about the food that we eat and the taste that we like that come from the second house. And also it can relate to immediate family as well as many other things, but that's probably a good start. So if we look at Harry's second house, we're noticing just the opening statement here is that we can see that the second house here is Aquarius, ruled by Saturn, and that Saturn has gone into the 11th house. And so straight away in astrology, we begin to think about that as being a financial combination, the second lord and the 11th house. And you might reflect on your own chart as well, or the chart that you're looking at. Where does that second lord go? Because it tells you a lot about how this karma is going to play out. And if you remember from the previous video on the first house, of course, in this case, Harry's first lord and second lord are the same planet. So the first lord also went into the 11th house, and we talked about that in that video, that it links his life path with his older sibling, the 11th house. And here you can see that the resources and the responsibilities this person has are also linked to that older sibling, to those influential people, to those institutions. So we can definitely feel that that is what has occurred in Harry's life. But how do you become a famous public speaker when Saturn rules your second house? So we all know that Saturn can make life in some ways a little bit more difficult, because Saturn's so afraid of, making its vulnerabilities or lack even more visible, because it's so aware of them itself. And when you're a public speaker, you have to be up there front and center. And the second house of speech and public speaking ruled by Saturn. So let's see. Okay, so as we discussed, the second house represents a person's financial security and their ability to meet their expectations, regardless of whose second house it is. That's for everybody. It can relate to speech, grandparents, and immediate family. In this particular chart, the house has 2 indicators for prosperity and 3 for annihilation. And you can see those if you go watch the video about the house analysis tables that you can buy on my shop. Or if you have a look here, we can see what are the factors that are leading to prosperity and annihilation. We've got here that Saturn is in a young adult state, and we've also got that it is receiving one benefic aspect, which in this case is from Venus. And we also have that, unfortunately, Saturn is Shushupti, so it's asleep to the karma that's occurring for it. It is with a malefic planet, and it's not aspecting its own house. So this is how we've come up with the prosperity and annihilation. Just because you're here, we can also notice that overall, we're saying that there's 35% support for ease. Now, these numbers are not really any kind of absolute number. That's not, I'm sure that you could get more than 100, or maybe no one gets more than 100. I wouldn't necessarily pin it on being 100 out of 100, but it just gives us a sense that only 35%, 40% for being activated, and 64% for discomfort. So we kind of notice that this house is going to be a little tricky for this person, which is backed up by the prosperity and annihilation as well. And if you had a look at the summary overall for Prince Harry for the second house, you can see that actually 35 is pretty low score. All of his other houses are doing a little bit better than that. And why is that the case? Because we see that there's a lot of more answers on the things that make life a bit more difficult, right? And the stuff that makes life a bit more easy, we're just not getting so many yeses on that. So for example, if we look here, it's ruled by a malefic planet. It's conjunct a malefic. It's of the earth element, which just makes everything, the planet, I'm talking about Saturn, a bit harder. We've got the tamasic focus of Saturn as well. We've got it that it's ruling these difficult houses. The second house is the Marika house. The 11th house is often also seen to be a bit of a yoga breaker. We've got the Shushupti of the house lord, makes it life more difficult. We've got 3 aspects from planets causing negative Lajatati Avashtas. The moisture of the planet is dry. The dignity is also not good. The house lord is with a malefic. The house lord is not aspecting its own house. It's an Arthur house, making life a bit harder. The planet itself has no confidence in itself, the Chestabala, and it's a fixed sign, which makes things just a little bit stiffer as well. And then the yoga score is also, there's a potential for negative yoga score. So you can see that all of these things put together tell us that the second house is just going to be just that bit drier, stiffer, harder to work with. So let's take this back now to the Prince Harry blog and see how we go. Prince Harry, his life experience, summing it up into a paragraph. Obviously, he has good access to secure financial resources because he gets, his grandparent is the Queen, and he gets this automatic wealth from his father's Cornwall estate and through the sovereign grant. But Harry is required to speak as part of his work, and he's not known as a particularly dazzling speaker, but he's increased his success in this area over time. He's developed his own rapport with audiences by being himself. And for example, by insisting on having himself introduced as just Harry. And you can follow the links in the blogs, but that link leads to this article, where this was all a little bit before Mexit, but where he's at a formal event and asking, just introduce me as Harry. I'm just a human, just like everyone else. And this is a good thing to remember about Saturn, that it it's very natural and it's very authentic, and it is of the common person. So this is a great tack for him to take in terms of how does one present oneself in front of all these people and be looked at, is to not really go for razzle dazzle and trying to create some illusion of celebrity or sparkle or something, but to be authentic. So it's a great tactic that he's discovered there. Now let's see how this life experience matches in with his sign and the planets and the yogas. So this second house is taking place in Aquarius. You can see over here on the chart. And we know that Aquarius is a fixed air sign. It's associated with pots, lakes, and silos. And these are all places where you accumulate resources. So this is one of the things that I always think about with Aquarius, and it comes right back to the Rashis and Signs course, which was the first unit that we did in the apprenticeship course, which you can now do on Teachable. It's all there, self-paced. And Ryan shared with us these beautiful descriptions from Yavana Jantika about each Rashi and giving us some words to help anchor what each sign has. And these words, pots, lakes, and silos. But these are areas, these are things, tools, creations that help us pull resources that we gather now and we use later. And Aquarius has that energy of, if you think of the hero's journey from my previous video about Rahu and Ketu in the hero's journey, the 11th is when the hero comes back and brings back to the community that wealth that comes from this big adventure. Even though the hero himself in the 12th is probably going to transcend this situation, before he can do that, he has to close the circle and bring these things back. So this is Aquarius. And Harry's resources are secure as reflected by this fixed sign. The money that he has access to comes from people contributing to the sovereign grant. So we think that he's getting the money from the Queen. And obviously the royal family has wealth of its own to some extent. But this sovereign grant that funds the main working members of the royal family is actually coming from the government, which is coming from the people because they paid taxation. So it's a pooling of resources. And same thing from this Prince Charles's grand estate in Cornwall. The rents and the profits that are made, a certain portion of that is paid into the duchy, and from that Prince Charles gives money to his children. So both of these sources demonstrate the Aquarius nature of pooling resources. Aquarius is also a humanitarian sign, and Harry often speaks in public about humanitarian causes such as the environment, climate change, HIV, AIDS, clearing of landmines, mental health, and more. And you can look that up on Wikipedia. But if you think about what he speaks about in public, there's definitely a humanitarian theme coming from Aquarius. Now let's look about what about the planets involved. So in this case, you notice that there's no planet actually in Aquarius, but of course, all signs, all houses actually have a planet that owns them or rules them. And in this case, Saturn rules Aquarius. So we want to know a little bit about Saturn. And we did talk about Saturn in the previous house because it also rules the first house. But we can remind ourselves that Saturn is a cruel planet. That means that it demands that you show up and do what you're required to do. You don't get any free passes from the cruel planets. It's tamasic, means it's focused on real world problems. It's dry and of the air and earth element. It's an indicator for time, discipline, endurance, and success through hard work. If we take public speaking as an example for Harry, I think it's a good way to show what's happening for Saturn in this planet, in this house, that it's clear that it's taken time for Harry to be public with his public speaking and his persona in public. And this is expected when an area of life is ruled by Saturn, because Saturn is so aware of its own flaws already that the last thing it wants to do is show that to anybody. It's also the slowest moving of the planets. And this is why any indicators that are linked with Saturn in the chart may take time to develop. They're coming and they'll come good, but it takes time for the person to overcome that innate fear or that innate back foot. You know, Saturn kind of puts one on the back foot. Now, Saturn, because it's so dry in its nature, it can make public speaking hard because it literally makes the mouth dry, you know, and it can also make the speech seem kind of sparse or austere and lacking that smoothness or the lusciousness that might smooth out some of that rough, dry speech. And we also know that Saturn is an indicator for fear. So therefore, stage fright would be common with this particular rulership. And this can be overcome by playing to Saturn's strengths, such as a dry sense of humor, which is definitely present, and adopting what we talked about already, this authentic and natural persona, being as, in a way, real and naked as possible. One of the things that we can notice about this second house is it is managing to get a Rashi aspect from Venus. Venus representing beautiful women maybe can provide some grace in this area of public speaking. And I think this can be seen that his mother, a beautiful woman, while she was with him in the body, definitely tried to make it easier for him to appear in public. And his wife is also a Venus, a beautiful woman, and she has been able to help him too. There's this lovely article, you can read the link there. But of course, she has her own comfort with public speaking, and with her celebrity persona, she's powerfully kind of embraced that, chosen to be a celebrity, whereas Prince Harry was kind of born into it. So this article talks about how she's helped him overcome stage fright. And maybe this is, how the astrology can help when we have that need, we must do public speaking. Where can we find that support from? And it is important to notice that, while he may have had, his natural problems with public speaking because of Saturn being dry and stiff, that diplomacy of the Venus Rashi aspect has also helped because his father and grandfather are a little bit known for their gaffes in public speaking, saying things that people find offensive out of context or they don't understand where that's coming from. He hasn't really had those. He's had some misperception by the press, but not based on what he's said. Okay, so this was all that could fit into the essay because we talked about this in the last video. There's a word limit. So one is always trying to say enough about all of these indicators, but not too much. However, on the video, we can say a little bit more that as we touched on in the first house as well, we can just come over and have a look at these Lajatadhyavashtas for Saturn because they help us to understand a little bit about the first house and the second house. And what we can notice straight away is that Saturn is being starved by the Sun, Moon, and Mars. You can see that's just a relatively small aspect from the Sun, just 66.8 points, but quite large aspect from the Moon and from Mars. And if we notice also that the Moon is awake, so able to send that aspect quite consciously, which always makes the Lajatadhyavashtas a little bit more penetrate our experience. So what does it mean when the Moon is starving Saturn? And we can have a quick look here on the Lajatadhyavashtas if you guys have seen this before, this is also on the shop. This is the way that I like to think about the Lajatati Avastas. For some reason, they seem like a periodic table to me. And here we're looking for the moon, for Saturn, sorry, being starved by the moon. So we want to find Saturn and being starved by the moon. And when that is happening, we can see we've got a lot of points of planetary aspect from an awake direction. And it encourages the person to identify with their suffering, and it can make them morose and depressive. The person feels a deep emotional lack inside of themselves, and this can never be fulfilled. So there's an enormous disappointment about their emotional experience, about their emotions. And because it's Saturn, they may have trouble expressing their emotional needs. They're going to express them in a crippled Saturn kind of way. And I think this speaks a lot to what you're going to see in all the videos about Harry's life, or what you're going to see if you read the blog, that there's a few combinations in the chart that help to focus Prince Harry on these emotional experiences that he had, the very strong emotional experience of losing his mother and bearing that. And we talked about that in the first video. I'm sure we'll talk about it in coming videos. Bearing that for a long time and trying to be stoic and Saturn through the whole thing, but internally very much having this experience, although I'm not inside his head and heart, and none of us are. But this astrological insight gives us a chance to empathize with what may have been happening, that the moon giving aspect to Saturn helps one to feel depressed, to focus on what's lacking, and that energetic pattern, to have that experience, nothing is going to fill that up and make it better. And we can only just honor and admire that Prince Harry has been able to come to his own strength in this area, to do his work privately, and then to speak up to others about what mental health is, why it's important, why it's nothing to be ashamed of. So he's really taken this experience that we can see from moon starving Saturn and lived it, experienced it deeply for a long time, tried to get away from it, tried to ignore it, tried to repress it, been depressed about it. But then once he took the courage, stood up and confronted it, he's then publicly spoke about it, which is what we said about the second house. Quickly, we can also look at that there is starvation from Mars as well, quite significant, although the Lord is not, he's a bit sleepy, so not on it every single time sending this particular starvation, but this can give a person an awareness that there's so much that they need to do to improve themselves. They always feel that they're just not good enough, and that they can never catch up with to get onto the front foot. So these are part of Prince Harry's Lajatatiya Vashta experiences that are very strong, we can see in his karmic life experience, and that I admire, and I'm very proud of him to say that he's used those really well. They would not have been easy experiences. Okay, let's have a look finally at how these combinations are working in the chart. So there's two main combinations that we're going to look at every single house. The first one is the ascendant combination that just comes for every, in this case, for every Capricorn ascendant. And then we'll look at the house lord combinations, so of where the house lord goes, so the Bhava yogas. So in terms of the ascendant yoga, Saturn rules both the first house and the second house. And this only happens for Capricorn ascendants. There's no other ascendant that has the same Lord ruling the first and second house. So what is one of those platitudes that sometimes you hear about Capricorns is that they're over responsible and, you know, they're dry and serious. But when you see that the same Lord, and not only is it the same Lord ruling the first and second, making responsibility important, but it's Saturn, this dry and disciplined, wounded, crippled kind of energy. So yes, a Capricorn ascendant has both the first and second house ruled by Saturn, and this also indicates that their life path is going to take time because Saturn is slow moving. But that because of this responsibility, the 1 and the 2, it over time, this person is going to get there, although it will probably be a hard road. And why is that? Because the second house is it's a Marika house, but it's an Arthur house. It's a hardworking house. So we're linking the person's body, life path, and personality with this Arthur hard work house. Now, in terms of Bhava Yogas, we've already mentioned that the second Lord, Saturn, has gone into the 11th house, which is a financial yoga. And we can certainly have no doubt that this person has a level of financial wealth and ease and access to resources that, you know, any of us would be extremely happy to be that well endowed. It also links our resources with older siblings, and this person's older sibling will be the king. So that link to influential people, the 11th house, is very strong, and to grandparents as well. So yes, we're affirming that this Bhava Yoga is definitely taking place in the person's life. But we do need to consider this with the fact that K2 is also there with Saturn. And this is something that in the essays I don't have time to share about. But here we can look at, I'm just going to share with you my notes from when I researched the chart. That when K2 is with Saturn, they both have a narrow focus. And they can hyper focus on problems and what can go wrong. They need to work on optimism and following their inspiration. And this is for me a key theme that is underlying in Prince Harry's chart. And it's not the main musical score, or it's like you have to listen for it, but it's really there. This need to focus on optimism, and I'll highlight it when we get to it next time. I think it's when it's in the 9th house, the 8th and 9th house, you hear this theme coming through again. And sometimes Harry gets criticized in the British press for maybe drinking the Megan Kool-Aid, you know, becoming a bit new age and becoming, you know, not a hippie, but, you know, open to all of those ideas, maybe becoming a bit of a celebrity. And certainly on other people, that could be, you know, one understands why people get criticized for that sometimes. But in this case, I really hope that it lasts. I think that this is exactly the injection of positivity that this particular chart needs. And there needs to be a real belief in hope and purpose to feel inspired, to get out from underneath all the heaviness of this chart. So I hope that continues, and I can see why that attraction to a very positive partner, and a very maybe sparkly partner, giving off a lot of big energy about positivity. I can see why that's such an attraction. Saturn and K2 together makes one good in technically orientated fields, but it can create a chaotic life experience because K2's goal is to break the person's attachment to discipline, to security, to rigidity. You can see, I've also highlighted in there, by working through this combination, you can see more potential in life and make yourself more flexible and less mentally self-destructive. And what a great way of summing up what Prince Harry's journey has been like. Just, you know, tragedy and completely not knowing what to do with those emotions, the moon's aspect helping one to internalize that and feel that lack so profoundly, giving this really invitation for depression through one's teens and early 20s. And then somewhere he's clicked this key and unlocked it, gone and done his personal work, and really allowed himself to once again open up to positivity, and really turned that around, used an experience that was so self-destructive, now devoting oneself to helping others free themselves from that pain of mental health suffering. So a really amazing life change and life journey. These notes, this and this come from Carla, but these notes in the middle come from the Teachable course as well. So if you're interested in learning astrology, you want to learn to read in this, I don't know, methodical or systematic way, these are the kind of notes that you're going to pick up from doing that online course. Okay, so now we've had a look at Harry's first house and second house. We've covered the Saturn, the planets ruled by, or the houses ruled by Saturn. We're going to move on next to talk about the third house, which is really interesting. We've got Jupiter in Pisces coming up. But take a moment now as we wrap up this second house to think about your own second house and how the things from our video today reflect into your own second house. You can think about what planet is ruling your second house. You can think about what the star sign is that gives you the field that your karma is going to be taking place in. What house has the Lord of the second house gone to? That's going to tell you a lot about the direction of the karma. And if your second Lord is Saturn, maybe there are things that you can identify here with. And also let's just reflect on, the life of Prince Harry and see whether we can notice these Saturn elements, these Aquarius elements, the second house itself. Can we see those coming through in the karma that he has grown and flourished in during his lifetime? I hope that you have seen what I can see there. I look forward to your questions and your feedback, your own chart. I'll put in the link how you can grab a hold of that Teachable course if it is something that you want to pursue learning astrology in this more systematic way. Okay, great. Now I'll just look forward to seeing you in Harry's third house. Okay, bye for now.